It's Mejia Made.
Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Danny Mejia, aka Mejia Made. Today, I'm back with another beat breakdown video. I'm gonna be showing y'all how to make a big sad 1900 beat. So let's get into it. All right, y'all. So that was the beat right there. Let's go ahead and dive into this breakdown. So the first thing I'm gonna start off with is the drums. So the first thing we got is this kick right over here. So it's a super straightforward kick. As you guys can tell, the only thing I adjusted is this little velocity right over here. The next thing I added are these hi-hats. And then again, as you guys can see, I also messed around with the velocity just to make the hats a little bit more interesting. Next up, what we got is the snare. After that, I added this open hat, again with a little change in the velocity. So the first hats I added were pretty straightforward, but I wanted to make it just a little bit more interesting by adding some hi-hat rolls. So I decided to go with another hi-hat, and I did this to it. Next up, I added a different open hat. And then I added this rim shot over here. And then before the drums turn around, I added this cowbell at the end. I also added these shakers. And then finally, I added a different type of hi-hat. This is more like an old school type of hat. So let's take a listen. So really quickly, just to give you guys some context, I'm gonna only play the hats. So one of the things I want you guys to take away from what I'm doing with the hats is basically, for those of you guys that are wearing headphones, y'all be able to tell more of what I'm talking about. I pan them left, right, and in the middle just to give it a different type of feel for the listener and to make my hats just a little bit more interesting. So now that I played the hats, let's take a listen to the drums just by themselves. So as you guys can tell, those hi-hats really make the drums just a lot more interesting. Obviously the kick, the snare, it's just pretty basic patterns the way I laid it out. But once you introduce those hats, it just gives it a whole different feel and bounce. The next thing we're going to move on to is the bass. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this first bass over here. So for this first bass, the VST I use is Monarch. I use the Bellow preset, but I did tweak it a little bit, so I kind of made it my own. But these are the settings if you guys want to go ahead and copy this bass. Then I added a different type of bass just to complement that first one. So the VST I used for this bass, I used Access. I used a Detroit bass preset, which I actually made on my own. So those were the drums and bass. Let's go ahead and start moving on to the instrument section. So really quickly, before we move further into the breakdown, let me know what's one of your favorite productions off of a Big Sad 1900 song. So the first thing we have is this sample that I actually chopped up from Splice. Let's go ahead and take a listen. The program I use to chop up this sample is Serato Sample. So let's go ahead and dig into the effects for this sound over here. The only thing I added is this compressor over here by Waves. These are the settings for it. And then I wanted to make it a little bit more lo-fi-ish, just that underwater feel. So what I ended up doing is deducting some of that low end up until 198 hertz take out some of that bottom end, and then I deducted a lot of that top end down to 3.5 kilohertz. So that first sound was cool, but I wanted to give it just a little bit more ambience, so I added this sound over here. So the VST I use for this sound comes from one of my favorite plugins, Diva. I use the BT Swept Away preset. So after I added those two sounds, I was trying to figure out what was missing. I wanted to give the instrument section just a little bit more melody, so I ended up adding this arpeggiator over here. So with the chopped up splice sample, the ambience I added from Diva, and this arpeggiator, all three of them sound like this. So now let's start digging into the effects I used for the arpeggiator. I did end up adding quite a bit of effects just because I wanted to give it a different type of feel. So let's go ahead and start breaking it down. The first thing we have is this reverb plugin called ROM. These are the settings for it. The next thing I added is this compressor by Waves again. And I wanted to give it just a little bit more of a wider type of feel. So I added this plugin called Wider. I turned it up to 5%. And after I added that reverb plugin, it kind of got a little bit too bright, so I wanted to cut off some of that top end. So what I did is add this RX 950 plugin, and I took down the bandwidth all the way down to 6,000 kilohertz. And then finally, I added this gross beat, which plays during the pre-chorus. Last thing I did is I wanted to take away some more of that low end, so I deducted it down to 230 hertz. And then for that top end, I took it away down to 12,000 kilohertz. So before the effects, this is what it originally sounded like. And after. So as you guys can tell, it's a really big difference. That reverb really did a lot for this sound. So next up, I wanted to add just a transitional type of sound. I wanted something that hit just during that first initial chorus section and verse section. So let's go ahead and take a listen. So for this sound, I unfortunately don't have the VST I used for it because I did consolidate it. Next up, to give it something different right before the turnaround, I added this sound over here. For this sound, the VST I use, of course, comes from Diva. I use the Mini Tinkling Bells Poly preset. And then finally, for another type of transitional sound, I use this one over here. Let's take a listen. So that was pretty much it for the beat breakdown. Before I move on to the outro, I'm gonna go ahead and play you guys the full beat. right, y'all. So that was it for this week's beat breakdown video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. For those of you guys that are new to this channel, I put out 4 videos a month. That's 2 beat breakdowns, a sample flip challenge, and I also break down my own samples. So if you guys gained any type of insight from this video, please subscribe. Please leave a comment. It's really going to help the channel grow. I appreciate you guys. I'm going to see you guys in the next video. Stay blessed.